Good evening. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Welcome to episode 3 of the Feminist Futures Institute. Hope that you all have been with us for the past couple weeks, but if you haven't, welcome for your first time. My name is Tamika Middleton. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Deputy Director at Women's March, joining you all from Atlanta, Georgia. I am really excited to have you all here, and I would want to invite you to take a moment and drop in the chat your name, your pronouns, where you're calling in from, and who are you bringing with you today. Let us know in the chat. Take a few minutes to do that. So we have a few people coming in from Washington State, Austin, Texas, Maryland, Western New York, Oregon, Michigan, San Francisco, Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome, welcome. Who are y'all bringing with you this evening? Who's joining with you? I know some of you in the past couple weeks have brought your children, have brought your coworkers and friends. So glad to see you. Hey, I see a neighbor in Atlanta. Welcome. So again, this is episode 3 of 8 web episodes. And so we hope that you continue to join us for the next 5 weeks. Last week, for folks who missed us, we met Kate Shapiro and Mary Hooks. From bell hooks to Mama Pat and the highway shutdowns in Atlanta, we explored our feminist roots, what to do when we mess up, and what it means to build intergenerationally and in community with each other. If you missed it, you can check out last week's episode as well as past episodes at womensmarch.com/feminist futures. Again, that's womensmarch.com/feminist futures. So over the next 5 weeks, we're going to continue to explore these questions. How did we get here? Where do we go from here? And we'll continue to listen from and learn about everyday women across history who've navigated these waters before. And we'll radically envision where we go from here. And in today's session, which is Change is the Only Constant, we are going to be anchored by Paris Hatcher and Kelley Robinson. And afterward, as we've done in the past few weeks, I'll come back and together I'll lead us through our third healing justice exercise of the Feminist Futures Institute. So we'll continue to explore where and how you fit into these stories and teachings that Kelley and Paris will share with us this evening. So I'm going to invite you to grab your supplies now. If you need a notebook, something to write with, something to write on, as we've done for the past few weeks. And I'll be excited to meet you right back here after Kelley and Paris's conversation. And so I want to invite you to stay tuned. Keep dropping in the chat, introducing yourself, your name, your pronouns, where you're joining us from, who you're bringing, and we will start shortly. See you soon.
Hey, Paris.
Hey there, Karen. Oh my gosh, I had to remember to unmute myself. Hi.
Oh, it's 2 years in. We're still trying to figure that out.
No, so weird. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to talk to you. So happy to be in this community. Did you see the sis in the chat that says she's dialed in from the nail salon?
I did. I said, get it done.
Yeah.
You better multitask.
The revolution will start in the barbershop and the beauty salons.
It's so true. So true. So to get us started, I thought I would introduce you. And you sent me your bio, but I'm going to add things. They're going to be appropriate things to the bio. So first off, I want everyone to know how fantastic Kelley Robinson is. I tell everybody this, everybody. If I could tear her away from her job at Planned Parenthood, which is like never, I would love to have Kelley on any team that I am on because she is one of the most incredible strategists and organizers that I know. I am serious. Nobody, no, I mean, literally, you can out-organize anything. You have built bases all across the country. You started on the Obama campaign. I met you when you were working with now named URGE, but it used to be Choice USA. You have been with Planned Parenthood for 12 years at least, and you have taken on different roles. And now you're the executive director of Planned Parenthood Action Fund. And you're a great time. You know, we've had some good times on the dance floor, but really brilliant, kind, incredible heart and visionary. Such big plans and such big, I would say, a buoyant spirit and optimism about what is possible. And also, you've got a pretty kick-ass family that includes humans and puppies. So that's pretty dope. And I'm obsessed with you. You're my little brother and I'm your big brother. I don't know. And if y'all know the show Empire, that's what got started. Jamal and Hakeem, right? Is that right?
Right. That's
You're
right.
Jamal and I'm Hakeem?
Other way around. I'm Hakeem. He's a little brother.
But that's little brother, big brother vibes. So Kelley, it's amazing to be in conversation with you about our movements, about how change is a constant, and just want to welcome you. You're a Midwesterner, which is actually such a big, it's a part of your personality. It's a vibe.
Oh, I love the Midwest. I'm here for it.
I know, you really are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Paris. You know, I don't even have to say you don't know, because I'm glad to say that you do know how much I respect you, how much I value you. I think, so we met way back in, I think it was 2009, around the launch of the Trust Black Women campaign, which was about disputing these terrible billboards that had gone up around the country saying that one of the most dangerous places on earth for a Black body was in a Black person's womb. So we came together to strategize about how we would not only take down those billboards, but redefine what it meant to really fight for Black motherhood, for Black parenthood, right? To reunify the Black family in a way that could build political power. That's what we were fighting for. And I remember sitting in that room. I'm a baby activist. I'm kind of wilding out, right? I'm probably a little bit in dire straits because of the night before I was doing too much. And Paris stands up and she gives the most impassioned plea for not what we think we can do with the limited resources that we're trying to string together, but for what we must do because the mission in the moment demand it of us. And I just thought that was the first time where things clicked for me. When it clicked, what reproductive justice was all about, all the oppressions that impact a person before they even get to the healthcare facility. And two, it showed me what Black leadership really looks like and what it can mean. And I think for me, Paris has always been not only a visionary leader, but an imaginative and creative one that opens up that door of possibility, right? That pushes us to a place that could have felt risky, but instead feels exciting and optimistic and hopeful, and actually what our ancestors have called us to do. So that's what she does for me every time I get to be in conversation with her. Professionally, she also does a whole lot of other stuff, right? She's currently the founder and director of Black Feminist Future, national Black feminist organization, amplifying and building power for Black feminist leaders. She was the executive director and co-founder of Spark, Reproductive Justice Now. Another thing about Paris, just like I love the Midwest, she rides hard for the South. And she's always about thinking and acting around how we can really lift up the leadership of the South as a model for how to create change across the country and really the world, thinking in this kind of global context. So I know that we're excited to kind of chat here about this topic, Paris, and I'm curious where you want to take it. You know, there's so many places we can go with the topic of change is the only constant.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what I wanted to start us off with is, in preparation, we had a prep call last week, and I was actually revisiting Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I was listening to it on audiobook, and it was being read by Lynn Thigpen, who passed, but she was an incredible actor. This woman, y'all might know her. She was on Carmen Sandiego. Her voice is just like kind of iconic for me. And so I thought it would be great to read from some of what is Earthseed, and it's Earthseed. So Parable of the Sower is the first book in the series that Octavia Butler is talking about this dystopian future. Now, mind you, in the book, it's set like in 2024, and we're in 2021 right now. So she wrote this in the 80s. So imagine just thinking that we're living in these times that she imagined. But the main character, who's a young person named Lauren Olamina, has a calling. It's like a download. And she is getting these verses around the way of the world. And in particular, the book of the living, the first chapter, it becomes, again, Earthseed becomes this book of the living. That's what she calls it. And one of the first pieces in this, one of the common pieces that people know about Octavia Butler's work is the first verse, which is God is change. So I'm going to read it, and it's less about a figure. I'm going to read it. We're not preaching around a particular type of practice of religion, but really, I think we're going to be talking about the power of change. So all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. So I wanted to bring that into the conversation because what powerful words from the 1980s from Black feminist Octavia Butler, writing this book about the future that we're like living in now, which in many ways feels really dystopian, and us reflecting on change. So I want to ask you, in these times that feel like for organizers that is demanding so much from us, what is your current movement practice? What is keeping you like steadfast, especially as we're facing so much, right? It's like what we're up against continues to feel like it's mounting. So what is your movement practice that helps to buoy you at this time?
Yeah. Oh, and I love the quote is on the screen here. All that you touch, you change. I love that you led with that, Paris, because I think that's really attached to my movement practice. I truly believe in change as the verb, right? And our task as activists, as leaders, as movement folk is to ensure that we are enacting change in whatever setting that we show up in to get just a little bit closer to free. And I think that we have to be actually relentless in this pursuit and keep in clear focus, right? What is it that we are actually fighting for? Who is the actual opposition? Too often we get caught up with problematic allies, right? Thinking that that's the problem when there's a whole world of folks that are actually trying to destroy us, right? And then for whom we do this work. And I think that when we can keep that central, it allows us to advance towards change in a way that's creating generational change. I think, when we were coming up, at least when I was coming up in RJ and following you, you all around in your steps, there were two things that resonated with me. And I think you said one of them. You used to talk about how the challenge with reproductive justice is that you're actually trying to bring to fruition a world that we've never seen, felt, or experienced before. So to do that, to bring about that amount of change, you've got to be a little bit wild, right? To be able to believe it's possible, have a big imagination to push through that door, and also have a fearlessness about you that allows you to access that change. The other thing that I feel like I learned coming up in RJ, really I learned from our indigenous folk, our sisters and brothers in that movement, was that we have to have the 7-generation mindset. So whatever actions that we take today, we have to know that they're going to have an impact 7 generations from now, for good or for worse. So everything that we do has to be embodied, has to be acted upon in that mindset, because there's something powerful at the other end of that. And there's also this thought that, hey, I'm so powerful that if I'm not intentional about the way that I move, there could actually be negative repercussions down the way. So I think that's kind of central for me.
Yeah, that's really great. I love that you were talking about like, who are you really up against? I think this is one of our biggest distractions that we really must work around, clarity around identifying the opposition and the target, and not, as you mentioned, problematic allies. We spend a lot of time with the problematic allies, because it's not as big of a fight, to be honest. It seems like you're fighting, but it's like it ain't really that much. We actually need to unite to build the power that we really need, right? And so it's easy to get distracted on things that really don't matter, people, folks acting a fool online, etc. And I also love this piece around being audacious. I think in order to take on this work, change making work, legacy work, which I think, that's the piece around change, is that it is always constant. I talk about my activism as it feels like Alexis Pauline Gumbs talks about a through line, right? So there's a through line that connects generation to generation. So I think number one is that remembering that we will always be in movement. Like movement is a verb, it's not just a noun, it's a verb. There is movement, right? And it changes and it alters over time. And so we also during that time have to really think about our own posture. And lately I've been thinking about this idea of what are our movement postures, and they change over time. So for example, and I in particularly am inspired by the natural world. So I've been thinking a lot about, are you your movement posture? Are you a volcano, for example? So for example, volcanoes are cool when they're not erupting, right? Volcanoes really don't erupt if they get all of their air, they're able to like burp it out, right? But if you get pissed off, do you like pour the city and kill everybody with lava, right? Like what's your movement posture where things don't work the right way? I've got to, I just shut it down, right? Or do you become some person where if something's not working, you become a glacier, right? Like you just freeze up, you kind of don't talk to anyone. I think there's all these different postures that we have to learn, because movement is also people. It's groups of people, groups of personalities. And we have to be mindful of our movement postures. Like, who are you, right? How do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with, because conflict is inevitable, just like change is inevitable. How do you understand a shared analysis of the conditions that we're up against, because they continue to change, so we know what we're fighting towards? How do we understand the difference between folks that we work with? Some people will be our lifelong friends, but that's not a must. I think that's difficult because we get told that this is supposed to be like your family for life. Some people will be, but it's not mandatory, right? It's not that you might be working with people who, they may not be your crew per se, but we can still do good work together. And I feel like for me around change, when I first entered movement, these were not lessons that I was really aware of, and they actually broke my heart, right? I thought that we were like one big happy kumbaya family. And when I was like, wait a minute, we're not all best friends, it kind of made me want to take my ball and go home, right? Versus saying, hey, I have friends over here, I have friends over there. This isn't supposed to be my whole entire life. It's just supposed to be an aspect of my life. So just a little bit of like a rambling piece around like how changes really showed up for me in as I've been in this practice almost 20 years,
Yeah. Paris, I got to double click on that, especially this part around our positioning, right? Because at the end of the day, the goal is to build enough power to be able to enact change, right? Power is a neutral concept. It's not something, and it lives in the relationship between people and the relationship between actors. So we got to build that power so that we can create change. And if you're an individual or you're an organization, you're just in you're playing a spot, a role in service of building power. It's not the ultimate role. It doesn't define all of who you are. It's your strategy to get to the end game. And I do think, sometimes right now, I think that I feel that heartbreak at times too, or I have felt it in my movement life before, because we're trying to get organizations to be it all, right? It's like, I need you to pay me a lot of money because my work is worthwhile. And also, I need you to dismantle capitalism, organization, right? And somehow we got to live in the conflict. Or I want you to be my family in this organization, but I don't want you to require my vulnerability. And it's hard because we can't actually, an organization can't be all those things. An organization can be one way that we try to move towards change, but you got to diversify your approach. And I'll say, for me, my full-time job is at Planned Parenthood. I'm the executive director of Planned Parenthood Action Fund, and I love it. And I also know that my organization is problematic. And I think part of my practice of movement building and leadership has been to try to make Planned Parenthood a more accountable organization to the people that we serve and to our movement allies and partners, and to be in a posture where that doesn't mean that we diminish our power, that we turn our light down. What it actually means is that we find ways to use our power to grow power for the movement and recognize at the end of the day, none of us got all the power that we need. And what we have to do is try to concentrate that power differently, do accountability work, but really focus the change making on the opposition, right? As our kind of end game approach, or where we're ultimately trying to change the status quo.
That's really, I really love that you mentioned that. So there was a comment, that Sandy Bell mentioned. Yes, there's a difference between not having to be friends, but we can have a level of respect for each other. So that is oftentimes where things degrade, right? Is that people feel like, okay, we're cool as being disrespectful versus saying, we're not friends, but I still can honor you and your dignity in your life. But we're not friends, right? Like we're cool, right? And so I think respect is a big piece. And in general, I think we all could benefit from working on our social skills, right? And I can tell you for myself, this current pandemic, because we're still in one, has really reminded me, like, oh, my social skills are not necessarily the best, right? Like, I'm so used to like dealing with apps and computers and stuff. I'm like, call someone on the phone and talk to them, do that. What? But anyway, I'm thinking about what you've mentioned about how do we reflect on our past, right? And so I do think what is important for all of us, especially those of us who are in positions of power, those of us who have, identities where, we benefit from privilege, and also just our positionality with movement really requires that we are reflective of the movements that we are inheriting. So I work at Black Feminist Future, and it would be disingenuous for me to say, like, I have to really be mindful that Black feminisms, or just feminisms in general, people have a strong opinion about it, like a deep, like I don't like it, or what I get a lot is feminisms is only for white women, right? And so there's that, which is like not true. And so I have to understand, I could get frustrated with people, but I have to be mindful that the media has done a really good job at that, right? White feminists have done a really good job at gatekeeping in that as well, right? Not all, but some have. And also, I think feminism in itself has also has marginalized other people as well. So it's marginalized trans people and been violent to trans people, queer people. It's also, there's a humongous class issue. And so I have to be mindful that though Black feminism is wonderful to me, some folks are engaging with it with like the history attached to it. So I am always being mindful of, how can we confront the past instead of dodging it and be like, no, what do you mean? That never happened, right? Be like, yes, this is a part of the history. This is a part of the interpretation. And what I want you to know is that what we're building is this, right? That our Black feminisms looks like this, that we have a legacy of Black feminist leaders that really we call on, that we pull on. And yes, classism, homophobia, transphobia and racism have been really big pieces in the feminist movement. And how do we address them and really not just give lip service to it, but do the work to create equity and liberatory spaces for folks who've been marginalized in our movements previously?
Yeah. Wow, there is so much there, because I think that there's this, you got to have a humbleness as a movement person, as a leader, right? Where you can both acknowledge the pain and hurt that people have experienced because it's real and it's valid, right? And at the same time, try to articulate a different vision moving forward. And I think that what the challenge is how do you move people across that rupture gap from the acknowledgement to the practice of, can we now come together to try to do something different? Have you learned anything there, Paris, in your work around how to allow people to be acknowledged in that harm, but also pivot or try to start the process of moving towards what's really possible moving forward?
I think my greatest learnings around this, around especially when a great rupture has happened, is looking for folks who do transformative justice work and folks who are also abolitionists who are thinking about worlds without prisons
Mm,
and really centering survivors. And I'm thinking about survivors of patriarchal violence in particular, that it really requires that we not just say a harm happened, get over it, right? I mean, there's people who are practicing transformative justice who say punitive or using the carceral state actually doesn't transform or help anybody. And it is difficult, right? I mean, I think we want to, yeah, it's very, very difficult, right? It's like, and I know I've seen you work with people that's like, okay, how can we show that, we're a good partner? Let's like show up for you. And it's kind of like, nope, it's never going to be enough. And I think it's also realizing like it's not going to be enough for some people. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's just not going to ever be enough. And it doesn't matter. It's like we have a lot of contradictions in our movements. And I think some of them, as I'm starting to just spend more time in movement, I'm feeling more comfortable with some of these contradictions. I used to, as my Virgo self, I really like clear, like it's this or that. But there's just so many contradictions. I think in particular what you mentioned, like capitalism is real. So people are like, I need this high salary, but I don't want to have any expectations. I don't want to be accountable. Or the only person that should be accountable is the ED, right? And EDs take a lot of hits for things. And it's like, well, they'll handle it, they'll hold it. Or the idea that a movement is only one person or certain leaders versus that there's all types of leaders. So I think we have these contradictions and I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how to deal with these conflicts. Some are easier than others, and some I think are just going to be around for a while.
yeah. But I think that's a word right there. Like, the contradiction or living in struggle is a part of the work. And I think sometimes we try to move out of it too quickly or try to resolve it when actually there's no resolution that's possible. We have to learn how to sit with it and then propose a different sort of solution moving forward. I also think, kind of related to that, one of the things that I really do hold true in my movement practice is understanding that isolation is a tool of the patriarchy, right? They want us to feel divided. They want us to use those contradictions to draw wedges in any way possible because that diminishes our collective power. And
Right.
start to figure out ways to move past that. Ooh, that's a threat, right? Because
Right.
when you move from, the Million Man March to the Poor People's March that Martin Luther King was planning, right?
Right.
Those are the things that we can start to envision, but it does require us to have enough humility, enough confidence, enough support outside of organizations to like sit in the contradiction and know that it's there and know that there's possibly not an easy way through it, but our charge is only to take one step forward, right? One step towards change.
Yeah. I mean, I think that bit it's a bit tricky is, I mean, based on your power and proximity to it, when we are navigating these relationships, you feel the impact more, right? So
Mhm,
it's different if I hit you with a bike versus if I hit you with a car,
mhm,
right? And I think that's some of the things that's hard around our movement is that there's some people and some organizations move with that type of like weight, and sometimes they're clueless about it. They'll be like, oh, I'm just a bike, right? I'm just a bike like you. And it's like, no, you're actually like an 18-wheeler, and you need to be mindful around the impact or like what's going to happen when we're engaging in this type of change work together. So something that could be like oops, that's like not a big deal for some folks, actually require more thoughtfulness. And so I think while change is constant, there is a way that we can be changing that is mindful, that we learn from our past. I do think that we should study. I think when people talk about, it's not righteous, whatever, to study or to read, it makes me think like some of your favorite feminist or women's activists or whatever, they not only read, they wrote voraciously. And we must study and learn from what other folks experience in other movements and other key times. And so that when we do shift and that we do change, it actually can be right-sized, and it also takes in the lessons from the past, because otherwise you're just making the same mistakes over and over again, and that's unnecessary,
Right. And that's harmful. The other thing I think we could do, we could pat ourselves on the back every now and then.
Yeah.
Like I'm here for it. I love to read the critiques. I love to read the analysis. But every now and then we can say, you know what, we did a good job. We did something together. And then start to break down what were the conditions that allowed us to be successful. And I'm saying this as a real person. I think I acknowledge I work at Planned Parenthood, and there have been historical traumas that this organization has perpetuated on the people that we are here purporting to serve. And at the same time, I think that there are ways that this organization has actually transformed the conversation around sexual and reproductive health care in the country. We can hold both of those things and learn from the good as much as we can, try to understand and do repair around the things that were challenging. I'll even say as a Women's March board member, right? Like, I think the 2017 Women's March fundamentally changed the game in activism. That does not mean that it was without challenges along the way. And I think, again, it's like sitting in those contradictions, holding it, but also finding as many ways to celebrate the progress and forward movement as we are finding ways to really break down kind of the things that didn't go well or the things that were harmful that we did along the way.
I agree to more celebration. I agree, not just always this steady critique. And also, to be honest, it's so interesting. So many of the critiques are from, again, external people, and they never really always know. They only have their experience, not like the fuller picture. And, and oftentimes they're half-baked, I mean, just to put it out there, I think critique is great, but I oftentimes think in our quick response culture, right, is that, do we ever get to like really take something in and let it sit and give it time to really give it the context that it deserves? Mm-hmm. Or, for example, people will be like live tweeting a movie and a show, and we'll have like a full blown like critique or like something as it's happening in real time. And it's like, can you just really allow it to like come together? Can you give it some time to, how can you even reflect? You're just kind of giving off spitballing kind of, and we're supposed to read it as like a real full-blown developed critique. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm a churchgoer, right?
Yeah.
And my pastor used to say, don't call a baby ugly right after it's born.
Exactly. Give it like how long? 3
resonates, because they look some kind of way at first.
Give them some time. Give them a year. Let it bake all the way. It's true.
A minute. Yeah,
it's true. So I'm curious to know, and I think maybe some of the folks listening too would be interested to hear about, how do you think your understanding of power has changed over your lifespan of activism? I mean, you're not done. You're like really in the, we're still active. We're still cutting up. But how have your understanding of what power is and how it functions. And I guess mostly like when you first started, what did you think we were up against? And now what do you think we're up against?
Yeah. I think for me, I didn't realize the huge size of our opposition. And when I say size, I don't necessarily mean numbers. I think I mean magnitude overall. So just one example, I think it was Center for American Progress a few years ago did this report about spending for developing leadership on the progressive side versus the conservative side. And conservatives are outspending, at that time, we're outspending progressives 3 to 4 times every year. In terms of how much money they were putting into the movement. So while we're doing tens of millions thinking we're doing something, they're spending hundreds of millions. While we're talking about getting somebody a paid internship, not only do they have paid internships, Heritage Foundation has a whole building of housing set up for these folks so that there are no barriers for them to come to DC or go wherever to build that conservative pipeline. So I think things like that started to be understood, or you started to understand like, the memo, gosh, I'm forgetting what it's called, that 40-year-old memo that they've got that was about how they were going to take back the judicial system, or how the boogeymen, the boogie people of the conservative movement, like Ann Coulter or Lila Rose, they didn't just emerge from anywhere. They have been built methodically from this pipeline of conservative leadership. Things like that, things like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, I didn't understand. Now I'm very clear on the full scope and magnitude of the opposition that we're actually fighting. And I truly believe, like our side, we don't have as much money, but I do believe we have more people. I think the biggest challenge to us truly realizing our power is the amount of imagination that we've got around new solutions that we can bring forward and moving as though we have that power already, right? I think sometimes we come in a little scared, or what happens if we're not successful? What if, when really we need to have this other posture of always moving, not like we're a bike, but like we're an 18-wheeler, right? The assumption of victory has to be something that we move with. Those are things that are sitting with me right now, because I really do think that on our side, it's not a lack of people, it's not a lack of infrastructure. The only thing we've got to unlock is kind of our imagination and our ability to take a big risk, right? To accomplish something together. What about you, Paris? I'm curious about the same question.
Yeah, I think, when I was really, about this work, I wasn't really quite sure what path it would take when I was younger. I was really curious about it. And I was really, I think like most people, into this idea of a charismatic leader who would like lead the movement. Because that's so much of what our movement orientation is about, right? It's around finding the voice that will organize people and point them towards. I think, that definitely has changed, right? That's when I was like super young. I think also getting very much so clear, like you mentioned, around the coordination. Some of people really feel like this is just by chance, right? So some people just happen to live in poverty. Some people just seem like it's kind of this random people that just all seem to look alike or having the same experience. It's random, right? It's like, no, it's not random. There's an order to it, right? And I agree with you. I think it's the willingness to dare to risk, because we're already losing. So why not just dare and try to take on much bigger risk? I think where we are right now, I think many folks are surprised that we are in the conditions that we are, where that we see many things moving forward. And at the same time, it's this facade, the attack has been so intense in every single way. So I think my understanding of power is that we need to continue to build it. Like we need organizers everywhere. There is never going to be let me say there's never going to be enough, but we need everybody out there organizing their blocks, getting people into formation, literally. And I think something that I also am learning is that there's such a power in culture and narrative. I think I wasn't really about that. I was like, I don't know. But there really is something so powerful in culture and narrative. And I've been learning so much from our opposition with that, that they really have been really savvy and with it. And I know we have the people. Folks are committed. Folks care. And I think for those of us who are in stewardship and on assignment to movement right now, like in leadership of organizations, it's on us to really turn it up, to really unleash unbridled imagination. Let's go for it. Who cares if it's been like already who knows if it's going to win? Who even knows? We need lots of Hail Mary. We just need lots of things, right? Like we need to move it. We need organizers, 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 organizers.
Yeah. One of the things that you said, I know we're going to go to Q&A in a second, that I've been ruminating on is the narrative idea that we tell ourselves constantly that we are losing. And I wonder if that means that we operate like losers, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Like when I was a kid, I played sports, and I remember I had this game, right? You'd be out there, I played softball a lot. And whenever you played not to lose, you were going to lose. Or if you went up to the plate hoping that you would get a walk or hoping you get hit by the ball, you probably strike out because you're playing not to lose. And I do wonder if there's this kind of mindset shift that we need to have, is like, what would we do differently if we felt like we were winning? How would we move differently? And I also know in my heart, I think that there's this person that's sitting around and has been watching the progress of the last 100 years, right? They've seen civil rights progress for Black folks and some folks of color. They've seen marriage rights, though not whole. I know we're not satisfied with the victories there, for LGBTQ, for lesbian and gay and bisexual folks. They've seen Roe v. Wade actually move into a policy and be instituted into law into some different states. Like, they've actually seen these tremendous gains. They've now seen, Paris, sit down, hold your chair, a woman of color in the White House. So I wonder if those people actually think that we're the losers that we keep reminding ourselves
right
all the time. So I do wonder about what it means to actually change our posture from being the losers to operating as though, we're going to have ebbs and flows in our ability to get free, but we're on the verge of winning, right? That there's a promise in store that we can actually get to.
I love that. I think you're absolutely right. So listen, stop acting like buck up, buckaroo, get your chin up. And I do think about that. I think about my mama when she went to high school. Girls could not wear, first off, she went to a segregated high school, right? And also girls could not wear pants. Teachers were visibly pregnant. You could not teach school. My grandma, when she became pregnant, she could not teach. She was like, once you started showing, you need to go home, right? These are things that have changed within
bank accounts. Remember that? Like,
exactly. And credit cards.
Lifetime.
Exactly. There has been, we have moved, right? There are things that we have moved on. I mean, I think about, and guess what? And we're moving, right? And what's happening around abortion access is absolutely flagrant. It is ridiculous. And the millions of folks who are turning up around this bill is incredible, right? That no matter what a court says or a state says, right, we are going to make sure that abortion access is going to happen, period, right? And so I do believe that we are, I do think that sometimes we're like, we're not going far. I think we got something, that was a good, like, pep talk by the coach. Like, it's the ninth inning. And I actually played softball. Our team was not good. I think we won only one game the whole season, but we get out there every game and kept playing. Yeah, we kept playing. So we got a question, and you want to take it on?
Oh, do you want to? You were just talking about narrative. Why don't you jump in on that first, Paris?
Yes. So what can we say more about power of culture and narrative? So So much of what I've learned about culture shift and narrative power is from Chanel Matthews, who I met doing reproductive justice work and is now the communications director at the Movement for Black Lives. And in particular, I think folks think about communication as oftentimes like a media piece versus culture and narrative is so much of what charges us as human beings. It's our values, it's the frames that we're taught. And in particular, um, values and sharing stories help people connect, right? It helps you connect to your own value set. It's different. It's why there's so much marketing that's put into like really trying to hit people in a emotional place. So when we think about culture or narrative, it really is like the heartbeat of what connects us as people. It is it is the traditions, the knowings, the ways of people, right? And it's held by different communities, different people, different, countries, etc. And we cannot minimize how important and amazing culture is. In particular, they talk about abortion as a cultural war or LGBTQ issues as a cultural war, when in fact which is not a cultural, I mean, they've called it that, right? But I think so much around it is that, I just give an example. I think something our opposition has done is that they have led with their values when talking about their work, and we lead with facts, right? So we'll say, just like the whole pro-life, pro-choice piece is literally like a different, like it's like a different value. Choice is a fact, or more kind of like a rationale, and life is like a value. Or when we just state things around abortion, we should state how we feel about abortion as something that we value. So at BFF, we have a campaign that says abortion is freedom. That is how we really, freedom is a feeling. It's a feeling that people can resonate to. It's a value that you have. You don't want anyone to take away your freedom, right? And so I think we need to do more use of culture and thinking about cultural strategy and narrative strategy as we're talking to people around issues that matter to us, thinking about the power of storytelling. And I think it's just, again, really, really key. It is something that's hardwired in us as humans. Hearing a story, we resonate with people's values instead of using facts, right? So yes, facts are important, but guess what? I mean, I got to tell you, when we've been looking at the information around COVID, the people look at the data and kind of like, it's not me, right? Not me. But the stories around this is what personally happened to me and my family really resonate with people, right? It helps move people to wear a mask. It helps move people to become vaccinated a lot more than just knowing the facts or the numbers, right? And so we need to just be mindful that though facts are important, I'm not saying facts don't matter, they do. But when you're telling a story, when we're developing a campaign, our values, our culture, and building narrative power really is important.
Yeah. And I just want to double click quickly so we can get to some more questions on the story piece.
Yeah.
That's a call to action, right? Like that's something that you can do every day, right? Whether it's talking to that uncle or that auntie that you've got about these issues, you can use your story to do that. And I also want to say it's not only a verbal act, like I think storytelling happens like that in a lot of our cultures, but it can also be a visual one or using arts or anything that's within your means. Someone asked me about the painting behind me. This is a Kende Wiley print. It's a beach towel, but I'll tell you that story later. And it's called The Martyr of St. Cecilia. And he uses this he reimagines the classical sculpture of the Martyr of St. Cecilia into this image because it actually tells a story of violence against Black men in our community, right? It is reframing an old narrative to really meet the moment. So I think, figuring out ways to do that, any of our means, whether that's storytelling with our families, using it to write LTEs, letters to the editor, or if it's doing it through visual or artistic means, these are ways that we can actually move hearts and minds.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at this question. How do we remain humble and respectful while at the same time fighting harder for our movement. I'm finding it harder to imagine a common ground with those that oppress us. Kelley, what do you think about that?
I'll tell you what I really think.
Let's do it.
I think that our task is to focus on how to get free and also to support our communities, right? I think it's about remembering who is holding the levers of power right now and how do we show them that they need us more than we need them in order to make progress and change, in order to get them to act in a way that is in service of our people or ourselves. So I think sometimes that looks like finding common ground through using things like storytelling, but sometimes it also looks like understanding people that are never going to be on our side. There are some folks that you're not going to be able to bring over. And understanding that that's a different group of people that you may not actually persuade, especially in the political world. Sometimes we identify who those folks are that are unlikely to be persuaded. But then there's a different set of folks that is very likely to be persuaded through things like storytelling, through giving them opportunities to understand the issues better, through information, through having direct lived experiences, through direct service work. Those are the people that we actually want to try to move to be with us and to find that common ground with. But my thing that I'm putting out there, sometimes I feel like as progressives, we're letting ourselves be all beat up to be the punching bag for folks that don't have any intention of showing you the kindness and grace that you are giving to them.
Say that.
Sometimes that ain't the right thing to do if it's
right.
actually taking away from your own self-care.
I agree. Find your people, number one, and you don't have to spend time. There's so many people who want to be with us, who've not had the conversation and have been invited in. Let's go find those people. I'm like, let's bring more of those folks in. I think about it from the scale to 1 to 5. So 1, people, they're with us. 2, they're with us, but they kind of whatever. 3s are like the undecideds.
Mm-hmm.
4, they are pretty decided against. 5, no. Work on 3 to 1, and actually 1 to 2 is great. Because I think, especially if you're getting started, it can be easy to be burned out by trying to go for the 5s. They're not moving. If you just want to continue to cut yourself out and bleed and be like, look, I'm human. You can't. No. They don't care. They're just like your mind is. No one's going to move you from your position. So, don't focus your energy there. But there are people, again, we have to remind ourselves that organizing is actually really key, and that there are people who want to be with us, but we've actually just not asked them yet.
Yep.
So let's open the doors to the movement, right? Like, this is an altar call. Like, there is room for you in the movement. Come on in. Like, this is an introduction. Come on in and invite your folks. There are people who want to be with you and not just give you a lot of grief. So, Kelley, our time is up.
Oh man, that flew by.
It did. It was good. I am so glad we were able to chat with each other. I've been trying to read the comments. Y'all are a very interactive group. I love that.
Yeah.
Kelley, I'm obsessed with you. I loved being in conversation with you. Thank you for this opportunity. And yes. I'm glad that we are going to be serving on the Women's March board together.
I hadn't heard. Yay. I'm so excited.
I don't know which one you're on, but I mean, I'm on it. I'm a new one.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
So
that's
great. That's going to be even better. And so much love to you and the work that you're doing. And
thank you. Yeah. And I gotta say, back at you, so much love. Thank you to everyone that joined this conversation. I know folks on this phone line or on this virtual meeting are not only the kind that like to listen and engage, but are the people that like to do and take action. I know Women's March is going to give you a ton of different ways to do that. A couple of things to keep in mind, I think that we've talked about, this work of narrative, of storytelling, I think is really important. In terms of actions, I just want folks to be thinking about not only what's happening at the national level, what's happening in your states and in your communities. Yes. Anybody that's looking for how you can interrupt some of this foolishness and harmfulness happening around abortion rights, look to your state legislative session. There are real things that we can do there to make a difference in addition to the Supreme Court fight. And the last thing I would say is, take care of yourself, show a little grace, and celebrate every now and then, y'all. We have come a long way.
Pat
and we have a long way to
yourself
go.
on the back. Give yourself
Yes.
a good hug. You're out here. We love it. So many of y'all were out in the streets October 2nd. Keep it up, right? Keep it up. We need you in this fight for the long haul because, as we know, change is constant and we're about that business. So thanks so much. We're going to kick it back to Tamika, who's going to lead everyone in a grounding activity. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much, Paris and Kelly. Please, everyone, show some love and gratitude for them in the comments, in your chat. They are both amazing, and I'm so excited that they will also both be on the board at Women's March. As we've been doing for the past few weeks, we will get into some healing justice practice. And so to remind you, especially for folks who haven't been here, I'll share some of what healing justice is. In another formation, I get the great honor to be inside of the Kindred Southern Healing Justice Collective. We define healing justice as a political strategy that seeks to intervene and respond to collective trauma, burnout, and violence in our lives and in our movements. And for Kindred, healing justice is about how we embed in movements tools and strategies to keep our folks in the struggle while they're seeking healing, to hold the trauma they experienced before entering the movements, and to address the trauma our communities are facing so we can create ways for more folks to come into the movement space. So I'm so grateful for you all to be joining me in these healing justice practices. And what we're going to do tonight to lead us into our reflection is a short meditation, really inspired by the conversations that we've had over the past couple sessions about what do we do when we mess up? What do we do when there's conflict? How do we show love to ourselves? At the end there, Kelly said, we can show grace to ourselves. And so we're going to continue. Paris kicked us off today with some grounding in our Black feminist elder, Octavia Butler, and I will do similarly. And so I want to invite you all, first of all, to find a position that is comfortable, that you might be able to be in for a moment, for a few minutes. We won't be in it long, but to be in it for a few minutes, so we can take a moment to really reflect on these questions and to feel them and embody this conversation. So find your position, and I invite you to put your hands face down on your lap. And then if you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. If that's not comfortable, it's totally okay. I invite you to soften your gaze, lower your eyes. Find a position to focus on, a spot to focus on, and take a moment to be in this position. And I invite you to take in a deep breath in through your nose and exhale with a sigh. Again, take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale with a sigh. And allow your body to settle into stillness. Feel yourself arrive in your body. See if you can sit a little bit more in your seat. Give your legs, your bottom, your feet a little bit more to gravity. Ground more in your chair or cushion, wherever you're sitting. And then see if we can bring some aliveness to your spine. Make a little bit more space between each vertebrae. Lengthen your neck and raise the top of your head just slightly up and back. See if you can relax your forehead muscles and also the muscles behind your eyes. Soften the muscles of your face. Release the muscles of your jaw. Maybe even release your tongue from the roof of your mouth. So if you can take a deep breath in and allow your breath to soften the muscles of your neck, the muscles of your chest, and also soften your belly. Allow your breathing to return to normal. Allow your mouth to close and your breath to go in through your nose and out through your mouth. I will read to you briefly a passage from our Black feminist forebear, Audre Lorde, who said, "I have no creative use for guilt, yours or my own. Guilt is only another way of avoiding informed action, of buying time out of the pressing need to make clear choices, out of the approaching storm that can feed the earth as well as bend the trees." The angers between women will not kill us if we can articulate them with precision, if we listen to the content of what is said with at least as much intensity as we defend ourselves against the manner of saying. When we turn from anger, we turn from insight, saying we will accept only the designs already known, deadly and safely familiar. Guilt is not a response to anger. It is a response to one's own actions or lack of action. If it leads to change, then it can be useful, since it is then no longer guilt, but the beginning of knowledge. And finally, we welcome all women who can meet us face to face, beyond objectification and beyond guilt. I invite you to take a moment to notice how these words land in your body. What sensations arise when you hear them? What has happened to your breathing? What has happened to your heartbeat? What's happened to your muscles, to your energy level? When you're ready, I invite you to begin some motion in your body. Maybe that is a wiggling of your fingers or toes. Maybe that is a rocking back and forth. And then to blink your eyes open. And as we close, I want to invite you to take a moment to reflect on the question, what does repair look like for you? If we are not getting stuck in conflict and anger and guilt. We must move to repair. What does that look like? So I invite you to write down your responses. You can write a song, a poem, a essay, a journal entry. You can paint a picture or grab your kids' crayons, make a video. Whatever that looks like, I invite you to reflect on that question and submit your responses to us. In order to submit, you would go to womensmarch.com/feminist futures and hit the submit a response button. If you registered for today, the link will be in the email you received this morning and also in your follow-up materials. And we will use these responses with your permission throughout the series as we envision our feminist futures. If you submit a response, you will be automatically entered into a chance to win this candle that will pop up here, which is a collaboration between Women's March partner artists and activist Milk and The Little Market, a mission-driven nonprofit fair trade shop dedicated to providing dignified work to underserved women and vulnerable populations around the world. We want to give a big shout out to Janet, who was last week's winner. Congratulations, Janet. And we will see you all next week as we look at the everyday women like you who have been leading the fight. We'll be joined by Rachel O'Leary Carmona, who is the executive director of Women's March, and also Nalini Stamp, who is over at the Working Families Party. So please do reflect. Please do submit your responses, and we will see you all next week. Thank you.